Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 12 ridiculously underplayed concertos. We already did ridiculously underplayed symphonies, but these are concertos, and they're even more ridiculously underplayed because in order to do a concerto, you need two ridiculous underplayers. You need a soloist who's willing to learn it, a conductor who's willing to conduct it, and an orchestra that's willing to let the soloist and conductor play it. And that concatenation of circumstances comes together very, very rarely. But there are some really beautiful, I mean gorgeous, fabulous concertos out there, and nobody does them, and it really pisses me off. I mean, I understand. You know, we all get uppity and we say, well, people should play this. It shouldn't be neglected. It's a scandal. Yeah, it is. But people only have so much time and so much energy. When you're talking about concerts, you've got to schedule a season. You want to bring in audiences. Nowadays, money is such an issue. It's so difficult. I mean, the way to hear this stuff, frankly, is mostly on recordings because seeing it live is going to be virtually impossible. But, oh, these are such wonderful works. Absolutely marvelous. So let's get to it, shall we? Number 1, Saint-Saëns, his Piano Concerto number 3. Now, Saint-Saëns wrote 5 piano concertos. We never hear number 1. We seldom hear number 5, which is also a shame, the Egyptian Concerto, but I've seen it live. It's just phenomenal. Lauren Hollander did it. It was one of his signature pieces, and I was fortunate enough to get to hear him do it. And number 2 is the Saint-Saëns, is the popular one. Number 4 used to be sort of popular, but not so much anymore. It's very interesting work. It mixes chorales and fugues and counterpoint, and it's really cool. So I chose number 3. Number 3, no one plays. It's never, and it's so beautiful. The opening is one of the most gorgeous openings of any concerto you've ever heard in your life, over rippling piano arpeggios. There's a solo horn intones a theme that kind of sounds like the opening of Schubert's Ninth Symphony. It's sort of do, 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 but it's not quite exactly. Very similar. And from there on in, it's just one lovely, fabulously glittery pianistic moment after another. You just fall in love with it the first time you hear it, and nobody ever hears it. Go figure. I just don't get it. Maybe because the second is so popular, people figure he just never wrote anything else. But he did. He wrote a lot else. I mean, I could have done the same thing with his first 2 violin concertos. Occasionally you hear the third, which is a masterpiece, but the first 2 are not terrible either. They're not. So there you go. Saint-Saëns Piano Concerto number 3. It's a must. Next, William Matthias's Harp Concerto. Now, William Matthias was a Welsh composer, a very, very good composer. He died rather young. I think he was in his late 40s, early 50s, mid-50s maybe. He wrote some very, very beautiful music. He's best known for his choral works. But he wrote 3 really good symphonies. They kind of sound like more tonal tippet, if you can imagine such a thing. He uses that sort of fourth-based harmony quite often, and so the sound is a little similar. And he wrote a harp concerto for Ossian Ellis, the great English harpist. I mean, everybody wrote for Ossian Ellis because he was the harpist du jour. Benjamin Britten wrote everything for him, his harp parts and all that, and he was an amazing musician. This concerto is, I don't know, maybe is it the greatest harp concerto ever written? Probably. I mean, it's not like there are so many to choose from. It's absolutely gorgeous. Wonderfully gorgeous. And I just don't know why people don't get a chance to hear it. It's got like harps and celestas and fantastical orchestration and really good tunes, especially in the finale. Da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. I mean, I can hum it. And if I can hum it, you can listen to it. And I love harp concertos. I mean, I'm just a sucker for harp concertos. So that's really one of the best. And it deserves to be recorded and played all over the place. I mean, it has had a couple of recordings, at least 2. There's one on Lyrita. There was one on Koch. But there should be more. So many more. Dozens more. Somebody should really make like a modern harp concerto record with like Radovara and Matthias and maybe 1 or 2 others. It would really be nice. Yeah, right. Okay, next. Well, the Vaughan Williams Piano Concerto. There's a beautiful piano concerto by a composer everybody claims to like. It's a heavy piano concerto. It was they claim it was composed kind of under the with an eye toward Busoni and that school of piano playing. So the piano playing is really vigorous, and the orchestration is quite thick. It's a push me, pull you work between the solo and the orchestra. It opens with a fabulous toccata where the piano's banging away. I mean, it's just terrific. I think that one of the problems it has is that it ends quietly, which is the kiss of death, of course. And it has, as a fugue, one of Vaughan Williams' Fuga Chromatica things. Da 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 da. I mean, you can hum it too. It's not that chromatic, but it's great. And Vaughan Williams himself was concerned at its lack of practicality. It's heavy keyboard writing, so he arranged it for two pianos. And in that form, it's a little bit better known. I mean, that's the version Adrian Bolt recorded, for example. And the problem with the two piano version is that it's even thicker and heavier. And, the pianos, double the orchestra even more. And yes, it is a bit of a fight for the piano and the piano to sort of dominate the orchestra, or, the way Vaughan Williams wrote it in the original version. But there's nothing that's impossible about it. It's really that quiet ending, I think, that does it in. But my gosh, it's beautiful. And it has been recorded a number of times. So you can listen for yourself and see. I have never seen it programmed. There is one on YouTube. I know, I looked. I've seen it actually like on YouTube, which is the only place that I've ever seen it. But oh, what a beautiful work. So there's that. Next, let's stay in England for another minute. Finzi's Cello Concerto. Now, the Finzi Cello Concerto was one of his last works. It's a late work. He died of leukemia. He was only in his 50s, in the 1950s. It's a dark, brooding, lyrical, beautiful piece. It does not play itself. It requires a certain amount of lift and urgency in the first movement, particularly because it's in a moderate tempo. The finale goes quicker because then you've got a long, slow movement as well. So it's not exactly an easy piece, but it is really, really lovely. And there aren't so many great cello concertos out there that we can afford to piss on this one. We really ought not to. Yo-Yo Ma recorded it as part of his, when he was for Lyrita, when he was a young unknown cellist. And when asked if he'd ever do it again, to make a new modern recording, he just laughed. I mean, he's like, hey, what are you kidding? So that's kind of sad, actually. He played it because he had to, and he played it very, very well. Since then, it's been recorded another 3 or 4 times. It's a very, very fine one on Naxos, if you're looking for a good recording. Begins with a tam-tam crash. What could be bad? It goes, da, yeah, crash. It's wonderful. The finale again has a great tune. Da 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 dum ba da da ya da 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 ba da 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 da. Oh, it's just wonderful. Trust me. Just trust me. And cellists out there, start playing the damn thing, Give it a break. Everyone will be very happy. It's a wonderful ending. It's delightful. Next, Martinu. He was like the concerto champion of the 20th century. He wrote zillions of concertos for everything. I mean, there's bunches of piles of violin concertos and concerto grosso type things with multiple soloists and 5 legitimate piano concertos, along with all kinds of other piano and orchestra pieces. The Sinfonietta La Jolla and the Sinfonietta Giacosa and all these. They're piano and orchestra pieces. They're just wonderful. Wonderful. But among the 5 numbered piano concertos, there is one that is one of the most extraordinary pieces for piano and orchestra in the entire 20th century, and no one ever plays it. It's number 4, subtitled Incantations. It's the only one with a subtitle. You'd think that would help it, but it doesn't. It's in 2 movements. It's a little bit less than 20 minutes long, or just about 20 minutes long, which is one of the reasons I think it doesn't get played, among others, the fact that no one knows it and it's Martinu, but it is well, what can I say? It's in 2 movements and it's a little bit short. People generally want longer things, but it's exactly the right length for what it is because it's extremely dense musically. Martinu was a twitchy composer. His music usually moves quickly. and it has lots of short notes and lots of elaborate things and parts and stuff. So after 20 minutes of this, it's enough. Not that it's exhausting or tiresome. It's not at all. But it's very stream of consciousness and exotic and spacey and exciting, full of incredibly exciting passages and bravura writing for the soloist. Oh gosh, it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And it also has been recorded, fortunately, like 4 or 5 times now. So you can hear it easily enough, and you really should, because it's phenomenal. Formally, you'll never figure it out. Well, it's actually sort of ABA forms. They're very simple forms, but Martinu packs them with extraordinary incident. An amazing work, and one that does not deserve neglect. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 5, 6. Piston, Walter Piston's first violin concerto. I've seen this. It was actually played in an all-piston concert in Carnegie Hall, like, I don't know, a decade or 2 ago. There was an all-piston concert, which was fantastic. I mean, they did this, they did a couple symphonies, they did some other works. What a wonderful impression it made. Really did. And I mean, nobody showed up. I mean, it was sparsely attended. It was a shame. But that first violin concerto is as beautiful a 20th century violin concerto as anybody wrote. It is full length. It is magnificently composed for the solo. It's full of interesting and fresh ideas. It doesn't sound like anybody else. It is beyond reckoning that violinists haven't picked this piece up and made it a repertory standard. I mean, it's certainly in American music, it deserves to be. It absolutely deserves to be. And it should be played like every 5 minutes. It's just lovely. And I can't say more than that. And we have to also talk about Prokofiev, who also wrote 5 piano concertos. And the one that really never gets any love is the 5th. I mean, the 4th is for the left hand only. And it's, I think, one of his weakest works, frankly. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks it's terribly special. Now you'll all chime in, of course. There's probably a Prokofiev 4th Piano Concerto Society full of one-armed members. But the 5th Piano Concerto was recorded fabulously by Sviatoslav Richter, who championed it. He recorded it for Deutsche Grammophon. It only appears in collections of Prokofiev piano concertos because you have to do all 5. There are very few singleton performances of the 5th Piano Concerto, but it's a good work. It's an interesting work. It's formally interesting. It's not as tuneful as like the 2nd or 3rd, especially the 3rd, but it's full of interesting melodic ideas and orchestral incident. And gee, it would be refreshing to hear it, once in a while. I mean, if Richter could do it, why don't other pianists take up the challenge? Why don't they? Answer. Why not? They're just too lazy. That's what it is. I mean, even people who do all of the concerti and recorded all of them don't play the 5th separately. They do it in context. I mean, you just don't see it. I don't know why. We should. Maybe because he wrote a couple others that everybody adores. I mean, that could be the reason. Nobody wants second best Prokofiev, but it's not second best. It's just in a different style, a little bit of a different style than the other 2 more popular ones. Doesn't hold any water with me as an excuse. Next, Szymanowski's 2nd Violin Concerto. Who knew? He wrote 2 of them, The first is the one that everybody plays. It's the one that's been most frequently recorded. It comes from his decadent, voluptuous period. The violin is playing like on its highest octave for the whole 22 minutes or something that it lasts. It's in one continuous movement. It's luscious and voluptuous and nocturnal and slinky and sexy, and it's just delicious. Whereas the 2nd Violin Concerto is in the standard 3 movements, and it comes from the end of Szymanowski's life when he was interested in Polish folk music. And so it's a much more rhythmic, sharply profiled, rougher-edged piece. Not rougher-edged harmonically. I mean, it's very, very listenable, enjoyably listenable, deliciously listenable, actually. And it's in the same style as his 4th Symphony, the Symphonie Concertante for piano and orchestra. If you know that and if you like that, you'll love the 2nd Violin Concerto because it has that same, rhythmic impetus and folk influence, but it's not, socialist realist folk stuff. Not at all. It's Bartók folk stuff. That is, the folk influences are absorbed into the composer's own style, and it's a thoroughly contemporary work, and very, very lovely. And it usually comes coupled to the first violin concerto. I mean, people do both of them, and everyone listens to the first. No one pays any attention to the second. They should. It should get played. I think there's sort of a rule in modern life that composers who write more than one violin concerto only get to hear the first one. I don't know why that's true. I mean, Shostakovich wrote two. No one cares about the second. I mean, Martinu's second is, I think, his big, mature violin concerto, actually, but no one cares about Martinu particularly. It's kind of interesting that, there seems to be a rule that you get like one concerto, one violin concerto anyway. But some composers were fabulous writers for the violin, Szymanowski among them, and his second concerto was just as good as his first and very different. Totally different. That's what's wonderful about them. They make such a fabulous contrasting pair. Next, Schulhoff, his concerto for piano and small orchestra. Boy, is this a hoot. It's a one-movement extravaganza, quite similar, very similar, shockingly similar, although it's earlier, very similar to the Ravel left-hand concerto. It has kind of a slow introduction that comes back to a kind of spacey refrain with bells and that kind of stuff. And then there's this jazzy interlude, a crazy jazz interlude. It's got all kinds of crazy percussion, a typewriter in it, and all things like that. It's really, really nifty. Then there's an absolutely gorgeous interlude for piano and solo violin, or a coda, which sounds, again, so much like Ravel. It's really fascinating, the contrast between. You have to think that maybe Ravel heard this piece or knew something of it. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. But it's a remarkable comparison if you put them together. And then it ends with like the Ravel does, a return to the jazzy bit at the very end, where it all just stirs up and goes nuts. Technically, this is a concerto for piano and small orchestra, and the orchestra is small except for the percussion section, which is huge. I think this piece would be just fabulous in any symphony concert. The audience would love it. I mean, it's a kind of piece that you don't know what to make of it at first, but it's so hypnotically, fascinatingly beautiful alternately, and jazzy and raunchy on the other hand, and eclectic and full of character and personality. There's nothing that sounds like it. I mean, even though the form and language is similar to what Ravel did, my God, you'd never mistake it for Ravel. It's really, really cool. And I just think it should be a repertory staple. It really should. There's an earlier concerto, by the way. There is technically a first piano concerto by Schulhoff, which is more in the Hindemith type style. It's also a very good work, by the way. It's early from his student days, but it's still a fine piece. But this one, the concerto for piano and small orchestra, is the one to hear. And you won't regret it. You'll get such a kick out of it. Then we have the Bloch Violin Concerto, which was first recorded by Joseph Szigeti and Wilhelm Mengelberg in the 30s. Here's a wonderful piece of romantic heaving and panting. I mean, it just does that. It's in Bloch's kind of primal, I don't know what you'd call it, maybe his Native American style. I mean, it's Indian style. It has this sort of modal, almost maybe Vaughan Williams-y in places. It's hard to describe. Again, it's in three big movements. It's a big symphonic piece. It doesn't sound like anything else by anybody else. I don't know why people don't do it. It's got everything a great violin concerto should have. I mean, it's fabulously virtuosic and technically interesting for the soloist. It's got wonderful tunes. It's in cyclical form, so it's very symphonically constructed, and it should, raise the roof at a symphony concert if anyone ever would play it. But nobody ever does. I mean, people don't even do Shlomo anymore the way they used to. That used to be quite popular, and now it seems to have disappeared, along with all of his other concertante works. I mean, his Concerto Symphonique for piano and orchestra is a major masterpiece. The Suite for viola is getting some play nowadays, which is also fantastic. But wow, this violin concerto is a knockout. Really a knockout. It deserves performance. And next, Hindemith. Oh, poor Hindemith. No composer is more on the outs than Hindemith these days. I just don't know why. He was a wonderful composer. It really was. First-class musical mind who wrote dozens and dozens of fabulous pieces and lots of concertos of all types. And I've chosen his cello concerto, his major cello concerto, because they're Kammermusik things for cello and whatnot, and from that series. But this is his major cello concerto. It's in his mature style, the kind of style that people like if they like Hindemith at all. From the Matthias der Mahler period, when he was affecting his rapprochement between the composer and his audience and writing music which he thought would be easier to digest. And the slow movement has the most beautiful tune, which was the source of William Walton's Variations on a Theme by Hindemith. He took the entire A section of that slow movement, and he used it as the source of his theme and variations. So it's known somewhat, sort of, kind of, and it's a wonderful tune. Wonderful tune. Do, 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 do. It's just great. Then it goes. That's Hindemith's signature. That he uses it in like everything. You hear it over and over again. It originated in Das Marienleben, his song cycle on the life of the Virgin Mary. Da 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 da. Oh, was muss ist die Engel? And it all goes, it's Hindemith. It all goes nuts, and then it ends on a C major chord. But really, it's a lovely, lovely work, and fun to listen to, and Janos Starker did a wonderful recording of it. I think it was with Slacken in St. Louis, actually. First-class piece of music, and that's its only modern recording, I think. There may have been another one. No, there are a couple others, pardon me. There's that series on CPO, so it's in there, and maybe a couple of other places. But it deserves to be played by cellists, along with all the other great modern cello concertos, like Shostakovich. And I mean, it's up there. It's really up there. However, last but not least, the one concerto above all others that should return to the repertoire forthwith is Leroy Anderson's 22 minutes of just unbelievable fun and frolic. It's a concerto that was based on the Rachmaninoff second, sort of, kind of. The opening of it was, anyway. It's sort of a takeoff on it. And it's full of sidelong glances at other great romantic concerti. And it's got, some bossa nova, sort of, Latin fabulous 50s Latin-esque music in it as well. And an absolutely wonderful hoedown finale. I mean, it's delicious. And it has been recorded a couple of times. Slatkin did it as part of his complete Leroy Anderson orchestral music series. It's on Telarc with a bunch of other American concertos. Anderson himself was not satisfied with it. That's one of the reasons I think it hasn't gotten the attention it deserves. He didn't allow it to be published in his lifetime. It only came out later, after his death. And I have no idea what he didn't like about it. Maybe he thought it was, too fun. Maybe it is. It's just more fun than anyone has any right to have. Yes, it's kind of a Pops concert kind of piece, but I don't believe in Pops concerts. I just believe in concerts. And I think we should play it at normal concerts. I mean, instead of the obligatory Gershwin Concerto in F or something like that, do this. You want a wonderfully fun American piano concerto. I mean, it's sort of like the Poulenc piano concerto. It's tongue-in-cheek in places. But my God, it's wonderful, and it deserves to be taken seriously. It's his only major long work in an extended form. And it's a masterpiece, whether he was happy with it or not. Who cares? He's dead and he didn't know. I'm telling you, you really ought to hear it. So there you have it, friends. 12 ridiculously underplayed piano concertos, not piano concertos, concertos generally, for all kinds of instruments, for harps and pianos and violins and cellos and things. And there are like 30 trillion more. And I know that you will be tempted to list a few of them. And if you do, I just want to ask you to do me one favor. I am delighted to hear your suggestions, but do not just make a list of like 50 concertos that you happen to know about, or that you've heard once in your life. I mean, give some thought to selecting concerti that aren't just unknown. I mean, just showing off your record collection or something. I mean, works that you really care about. Talk about fewer if it's necessary. It's better to do less, but to have it be meaningful. You know what I mean? So that you could actually, when you give your list, maybe say a word or two about a couple of them, about why they're special to you or why you particularly like them, rather than just giving me like, this is what I have in my record collection. Anybody could do that. You're smarter than that. I know you are. So make your choices matter, because I want these lists to matter to future generations. I want them to know how much we loved this stuff, how much we cared, how much we knew that you would love it too, that everyone out there would love it as well. So thank you so much for joining me. Keep on listening and take care.